moving along, just like we've done for arrays, we've done for objects, because I can get the property, so because I can get the content, in this case, welcome to script tags one. So because I can get this content, I can decide to modify the content. So I can come here and say I want to change this content to changed. So I want to say changed HTML content. So when I go back to my browser and I refresh, you can see that I've been able to modify the content of my HTML tag. So um that is what JavaScript allows us to do. So another thing we can do is we can create elements. So I can say document dot create element, and I can decide to create an h4. Then I would assign whatever is being created to an h4, and I can decide to log I can decide to log my h4 element which is being created on line 1 here. So if I go back to my browser and I refresh, you can see that an empty h4 element has been created. Now, just like we did previously, I can access the inner HTML attributes for this element that I have just created. But remember, my element is empty. So when I refresh this, I am going to get an empty console log in my browser. So the way I can do this is by modifying that attribute. So I can say h4 dot inner html is equal to new heading. So when I go back to my browser and I refresh, you can see the content of my h4 element. But now this element is just in my console. We can't see it on my web page. So what I can do here is I can append this element to another element in my HTML document. So let's say I try to do body. Okay, before I can do that, I would need to access the element first. So I would say const body is equal to document dot query selector, and I'll pass in my body tag. So before we append that, let's see what my body tag is returning. So I can say console.log body. Now when I refresh this, we can see that it is returning the old body. So now that I have my body and I am creating a new heading and modifying the content of that heading, I can now go ahead to say body.append, and I can append this new element I've just created to my body. So it would add this element to the end of my body. Now let's refresh, and we can see here that I have a new heading inside of my web page. So everything is working as expected. But let's assume we want to add this element to the top of my body. So let's assume I want my new heading element to come above all of my paragraphs. So the method I would use in that case, instead of append, would be prepend. And you can see here that the heading goes to the top of my body. So we have looked at lots of various concepts for the DOM. So how we can we've seen how we can access elements in the DOM. We've seen how we can modify the content of those elements. So similarly, we can modify the attribute of elements as well. So just like we've done for content of each element, we can also modify attributes. And we know that some HTML elements have attributes such as an anchor tag. So let's say I add an anchor tag here. I can decide to add an href that goes to it.ng. Then this would read it. So so I can decide to change this anchor tag to something else from my JavaScript file. And remember, before you can modify anything, you need to access that element first. So I would say const anchor for anchor tag, and I would get that element by saying document.query selector, and I'll pass in my query here, which would be a. Now I can do a console.log anchor. Let me clear this one. So when I go back to my browser and I refresh, we can see the anchor tag here. Now I can access my so I can access the attribute by saying anchor dot um let's see anchor.attributes. So it says href. Let's see anchor.href. So we can see that when I say anchor.href, it returns the link to me. So I can modify this link here by saying anchor.href is equal to google.com. So when I refresh this, we can see that it has changed to google.com. So I'll need to say https://google.com and also https://it.ng. So we can see that this takes me to google.com. So that is how I can modify the attributes for my anchor tag. So you can modify attributes for other tags that have attributes as well. So just to um refresh this DOM again, because we've done a lot. So let's say the first thing I want to do here is to access an element. So let's say, how can we access elements? So we can access elements by calling our document, then using the query selector function to pick an element. So I can pick this element, but because I am working in JavaScript, I need something to help me keep track of this element. So that is why I'll be creating a variable, in this case called anchor, that can help me hold that particular element. So I can make use of that variable in any other part of my program. So it will return the variable. Now I can decide to change the content of my HTML element. So I can say anchor.innerHTML. This will return it. So I can change this to itng. So we can see here that I have modified my inner HTML. Similarly, I can access my anchor.href attribute and it would return it.ng, but I can also change this to something else. Let's say google.com. So we can see here that the inner HTML attribute has changed to google.com. Just as well, I can also decide to create elements. So I can create elements by using the document.create element function, and I'll pass in the element I want to create. But this element is just being created. It will be lost in memory because I am not saving it in any variable. So I can save this in a variable called heading heading1. Now I can access that variable anywhere inside of my program. So you can see the heading here, and I can even go ahead to modify the new element I have just created, which is heading1. I can access the inner HTML and say it is equal to a new heading. Now when I log this, heading1 inner HTML, it is going to return a new heading. So let's say here a new heading. So we can see that here. Now I can also decide to add this heading to my web page. So to do that, I would need to access the body. So adding new elements to web page. So I'll need to access the body by using the document.query selector, and I'll pass in my body tag. So I can say a console.log body, then I can comment this out as well as this. And when I refresh this, we can see I have the body here. So I can take that body and say body.append. So I want to append my heading one element I just created in my JavaScript file. So we can see here that I have a new heading. But if I want to add that heading to the top, I would prepend it. So we can see that the heading has gone to the top because I changed my function to prepend. So those are the concepts we've introduced. So let's see if we can go over this example here. So it says we should create an index.html file called index.html. So we already have that. So let me just clear this out and clear this as well. So we've created the index.html file. The first part is done. Then inside the index.html file, use the script tag to link an external JavaScript file. So I would create my boilerplate using HTML:5, then press tag. So would say script tag,